Welcome to The Explainer. So, today we're exploring a deeply visceral contrast that really defines the human experience. I mean, think about it. When it rains today, what do? You probably close the window, brew a warm cup of coffee, grab your coziest blanket, and just fire up Netflix, right? You wiggle into that perfect spot on the couch, and the rain is just this pleasant tapping background noise. It makes you feel calm, maybe a little sleepy. But I want you to try and imagine that exact same sound, that heavy, soaking, wind-driven rain, but 50,000 years ago. Back then, that sound absolutely wasn't a signal to relax. It was a terrifying life-or-death crisis.
Okay, let's dive right into this. Imagine you haven't eaten in 2 days. You tracked a herd all day yesterday, you found the prints, you mapped the entire route in your head, and literally all you have to do is get there. But then, the sky just opens up. It rains all day, all night, and right into the next morning. You can't hunt. The mud has washed all your tracks away completely. You can't even move through the open. Because bare feet on wet, rocky terrain means a twisted ankle. And out there, a twisted ankle basically means death. The river's rising, and your fire, which is the only thing keeping you warm and keeping the predators away, is starting to struggle. You aren't bored on a rainy day, you're trapped.
Section 1. 3 Ways to Die. To really understand our baseline survival hierarchy, we have to recognize that rain fundamentally changed the geography of our ancestors' world. It compressed the entire outdoor environment into a few small, dry, and incredibly dangerous spaces. And if you were stuck in one of them, the rain could kill you in 3 very distinct ways before the storm even passed. First up is the cold. To put this into perspective, a wet human loses body heat up to 25 times faster than a dry one. So without waterproof clothing or a modern shelter, a long storm in anything below 50 degrees Fahrenheit could drop your core temperature into hypothermia in a matter of hours. Second is flooding. Humans naturally sought shelter in caves at the base of hillsides or near rivers, which unfortunately made them prime targets for flash floods. Archaeologists have actually found thick layers of flood sediment inside these occupied caves, proving that water literally rushed in while people were living there. But the third threat? It's the absolute worst. Predators. Because rain drove animals into shelter too. At certain cave sites in South Africa, archaeologists have found human remains and large cat remains in the exact same dirt layers. And get this, some of those human skulls have puncture marks that perfectly match leopard teeth. You weren't just seeking shelter, you were competing for it against apex predators.
Section 2. Keeping the fire alive. In the middle of all that compressed, terrifying chaos, one job mattered more than absolutely everything else combined. If you were trapped by the rain, your primary objective, your only real objective, was stopping the fire from going out. The timeline here highlights a massive technological gap that we often take for granted. We have evidence of potential fire use 1 million years ago at Wonderwork Cave and controlled fire 400,000 years ago at Quizzum Cave. But here's the absolutely crucial point. For most of human history, controlling a fire that already exists and creating one from absolutely nothing were 2 entirely different skills. It actually wasn't until roughly 40,000 years ago that we are confident humans could reliably start a fire from scratch. So if your fire died during a storm, you couldn't just flick a lighter. You might literally have to physically carry an ember from a neighboring group, assuming they even had one to spare.
The science behind how they solved this is just incredible. Ancient humans basically invented biological lighters. Some groups wrapped smoldering coals in green leaves to transport them, while others packed them inside tinder fungus. This is a woody mushroom that could catch a spark and safely smolder inside itself for hours. And to get a wet fire roaring again, they relied on birch bark. Birch bark contains a highly flammable chemical called betlein, which allows it to burn even when it's soaking wet. Talk about ancient ingenuity.
And this brilliantly illustrates just how deep this fear of losing fire ran in our DNA. What we're looking at is the fire kit belonging to Ötzi the Iceman, a beautifully preserved 5,300-year-old mummy found in the Alps. Think about that. Even relatively recently in human history, the threat of losing your fire was so severe that you carried dedicated backup equipment on your belt at all times. It's like an ancient survival everyday carry. Tinder fungus, flint, iron pyrite for striking sparks, and extra plant tinder.
So, when the rain hit, the group immediately initiated a really strict protocol. First, you move the fire deeper into the cave. Then, you shield it with animal hides or brush. Next, you scramble to scavenge for the dead, lower branches of coniferous trees, because the canopy above usually keeps them dry. You meticulously split open wet logs just to get to the dry wood hiding inside. During a raging storm, one person's entire job, like their only job for hours on end, was to obsessively feed, shield, and protect that flame. It represented warmth, light, cooked food, and the literal center of all social interaction.
Letting it die was fatal.
Section 3. The original makerspace. But let's think about this for a second. What happens once the fire is secure, you're mostly dry, and the sheer terror subsides? Well, you still can't leave. This forced confinement actually equals free time. And that free time transformed caves from simple survival shelters into humanity's original production workshops. Let's trace this timeline of technological leaps because it is astounding what humans do when they're stuck indoors. Archaeologists regularly find caves packed with flaking debris. Those are the tiny stone chips that fly off when you're shaping a tool. And they're concentrated exactly where someone would sit near the firelight. At Blombos Cave, 100,000 years ago, someone set up a whole workshop with abalone shell mixing bowls to grind ochre pigment. At Sibidu Cave 77,000 years ago, people were creating bedding mats using Cape laurel leaves, which act as a natural insect repellent. They were doing pest control. By 61,000 years ago, we start seeing delicate bone needles with tiny drilled eyes. You'll make a precision bone needle while running from a predator. You make it when you're sitting perfectly still with hours to spare while the rain pounds outside.
And here is one of the most underrated inventions in history. 52,000 years ago in France, Neanderthals were twisting plant fibers into string, and then 35,000 years ago in Germany, someone carved a mammoth ivory tool specifically designed with 4 spiral grooves to act as a rope-making machine. I mean, think about it. Making rope is slow, it's highly repetitive, and it requires immense patience. It is the absolute perfect bad weather task. And that indoor invention revolutionized literally everything: how we built shelters, created snares, and bound tools to handles.
Section 4. Art in the dark.
As we move further up our survival hierarchy, we transition from practical tools into sheer self-actualization. The forced downtime didn't just yield better weapons, it triggered a massive cultural explosion. 45,000 years ago in Sulawesi, Indonesia, we see the oldest known figurative art, and 36,000 years ago in the Chauvet Cave in France, ancient humans painted lions, horses, and rhinos with a level of anatomical perfection that still leaves art historians in absolute awe today. Some of these animals are drawn mid-stride, with muscles tensed and heads turning. These were not casual doodles. These artists studied their prey for thousands of hours out in the wild, and then perfectly recreated them entirely from memory, deep underground, illuminated only by a flickering fire.
This quote really hits the nail on the head and captures the reality of cave art. These masterpieces aren't sitting at the entrance of the cave where you'd wait out a light drizzle. No, they are located deep inside, sometimes hundreds of meters through incredibly narrow, pitch-black passages that you literally have to crawl on your belly through. Someone carried an animal fat lamp into total darkness just to paint. You don't do that when the weather is perfect and the hunting is good. You do that when you've been trapped inside for days, you've already sharpened every single tool you own, and there's absolutely nothing left to do but crawl into the dark and create.
Section 5. The first social network.
Beyond the physical artifacts, we really have to look at the immense sociological impact of the rain. Imagine a group of 15 to 30 humans trapped together in a confined space for days on end with nowhere to go. This forced proximity effectively birthed human culture as we know it. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the data from anthropologist Polly Weissner's study on the Juhoansi Bushmen in the Kalahari Desert. She tracked what people talk about during the day versus at night by the fire. During the day, conversation was highly practical: land rights, resource complaints, the daily grind. But at night, around the fire, over 80% of the conversation shifted to stories, songs, and myths. The firelight physically changed how humans interacted. It softened faces, it reduced tension, and it created the original social network.
And the stories shared around those rainy day fires weren't just idle small talk. They formed what we can call a survival syllabus. When they told stories, they were encoding absolutely critical data: where the water sources dry up in the summer, exactly which plants are safe to eat, where to find the best flint deposits, and the specific behavioral quirks of certain prey. This was high-stakes information being transferred directly from one brain to another across generations.
To really grasp the power of that fireside transfer, consider this number: 7,000. That is the age, in years, of verified Australian Aboriginal oral traditions. These stories accurately describe geological sea level changes that happened 7,000 years ago. That level of cultural memory doesn't just happen by accident. It survives because groups spent enormous amounts of downtime sitting together, retelling those stories over and over while the rain poured outside.
Section 6. When the rain stops.
But hey, the rain doesn't last forever. And when the skies finally clear, those ancient humans didn't step back into the same world they left. The rain completely transformed the landscape, turning it into a sudden paradise of resources. The heavy water turns the ground soft, which means you suddenly have perfect, highly detailed animal tracks showing exactly what passed by and how fast. Depressions in the rocks, some deliberately carved out by early humans, are suddenly full of clean, safe drinking water. The moisture causes explosions of mushrooms and makes tubers so much easier to dig up from the wet soil. And perhaps most importantly, termites swarm after the rain. In tropical Africa, termites are one of the most protein-dense foods available. You don't even need tools to hunt them, you just scoop them up. We actually see chimpanzees gorging on termite swarms after rainstorms today, and early humans undoubtedly took advantage of this massive, effortless protein boost.
So we are left with this final, really provocative thought. Would we even be human without the rain? Boredom, as we experience it today, simply didn't exist for them. When your survival depends entirely on what you can make with your hands over the next few hours, forced downtime isn't a nuisance, it's the driver of innovation. The rain forced us to sit down, think, invent string, tailor clothing, paint our memories, and tell the stories that allowed our species to conquer the globe. So the next time you're stuck inside on a rainy day, remember, that bad weather might just be the single biggest reason we are still here.